Welcome back. Today we are talking with Jennifer Britton and her book, Reconnecting Workspaces. Jennifer, great first segment there. I love the discussion on culture and all of that. You really had my attention big time on that one. But let's jump back to the book because I know we got a little bit off topic, sometimes there. You talk about the changing roles, leadership and team members. How are the roles changing and what kind of roles can we expect now in the new, I don't want to say the new normal, but the new post-pandemic world?
Great question. Well, again, I think there has been a real shift in the last few years of what the role of the team leader is and what the role of the team member is. By nature, by default, when we're working in different locations, whether it's a different office or whether it's a different, I'm working from home or I'm back to the mobile world, I need to do my work more autonomously. And that was really magnified in these last few years. So the role of the team leader never really changes. If we go back to just leadership 101, right? Like, let's go back to the basics. What is the role of a leader? To provide direction, to provide support, to help link people with the mandate and the larger objectives of an organization. And so when we're not physically present together, that can really change. And I need, if I'm a worker working out of home, working on the road, I need to be even more clear on what those objectives are, what I need to know in order to make decisions in the moment. So the big shift we have seen in many organizations, not every organization, but have been a flattening, sort of been a flattening of, what sort of purview do I have? What role, what responsibilities do I need to take? Do I have a bit more autonomy in doing my job? And so it's interesting as organizations go back into the office. Are roles changing? Is that autonomy changing? If we're now hybrid, is it staying the same? So again, I think because we're seeing so many different rules and so many different ways of working, organizations need to look at this as well as part of that culture discussion. How are we evolving? Are we becoming a more collaborative environment? Are we really partnering more so that it is yes, there is still a distinct role for a team leader because they are responsible. They are the ones that are responsible for the team. But we can also activate our team members and empower our team members to do their work. And if we put that against, what we're seeing in terms of generational differences, what younger people want as they're getting into the workspace, interesting things. That's a whole other topic. I touch on it lightly in Reconnecting Workspaces, but I think we need to be very aware of who is on your team. What is their objective? What are they looking to achieve in their world of work, whether they're in their first few years or they're a seasoned employee as well.
With the virtual world and roles that have changed, you mentioned empowerment. It seems to me now that before the pandemic, yes, leadership was quote unquote empowering people. But when the pandemic hit, that's when real empowerment started and people were able to actually do things because they didn't have someone over their shoulders
Exactly.
anymore. You
Yes.
know,
And leaders had to learn how to lead through influence, right? The command and control does not work over distance. So if I want to really activate my team to do exceptional work, as a leader, I need to get to know them. I need to understand what motivates them because I can ask you to complete this, but if you're not driven to do that, if you're not interested in doing that, it's not going to happen. And it doesn't matter how much I pay you, like if I cannot see you, if we cannot sit down together physically, really, this is where that internal locus of control, the real empowerment, which is, like, how do we activate people? How do we get people to do their best work, to care for their work, to be, to find that they're able to use their skills, talents, and be motivated by it?
mhm.
That is the shift that really has happened. And it's going to be interesting, I think, in the more medium term. How is leadership changing when people go back to the office? Are they reverting to how they were?
Yeah.
If so, how is that working, right? Leadership is a two-way relationship. It's not just what the leader does, the team member also plays a key role. And I think that's what I've been really fascinated with as a longtime leader myself, right? I learned leading in hybrid environments in the early 1990s. We did not have all of this technology, yet I was hundreds of miles away from the teams that I supported, connected by long range radios. So those old MASH style radios, to help them like do their great work and to ensure that they were, health and safety, and they got through their mandate in a great way. It wasn't about me giving directions. It was really about activating them so that they could do their best work. And my role became troubleshooter. My role as a leader became, how do I connect you with the resources you need? And I hope that as we look back in the future, leaders realize that's really what they were doing during the pandemic. It's a different style of leadership. So
Yeah.
going forward, what's appropriate? If you're hybrid, how do you maintain that and not just say, okay, we need to collaborate here in the office? Well, how do you also partner and keep those conversations going over the virtual space as well?
I was told a long time ago, you're not a leader if someone doesn't want to follow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then you can break that down however you want to. But, and I thought, yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly. Leader, and so you look at the work of writers like Robin Sharma, Leader Without Title, right? Like, are we also back to culture? What kind of culture are we evolving? Are we building a culture where everyone is a leader? Everyone can have the potential to be a leader. Everyone is playing a key role in the organization. And that's part of, as we reconnect in workspaces, as we continue to evolve, we've got to have those conversations. And that needs to happen from C-level all the way down to the youngest employee. Now, as a CEO myself, right, it's interesting. I know many of my colleagues still have very much a very specific way of seeing the world. My vision is very different, because as I grew up from my young 20s as a leader, my lesson learned has always been you can't change things if people don't want to change. And so how do we really look to fit people in the right spaces? Even, the cover of the book, you can see, the fitting together of people. What does that relationship look like? What does the organization need as we continue to evolve?
And leaders have to accept that change is going to happen. Pandemic changed a lot. So there's no point fighting that.
No.
Because it's already happened. The cat's out of the bag.
Yes.
You can't change that. It reminds me of my own situation years ago. I had a boss, Phil, and he was always giving great direction and things like that. But I saw a book on his desk by Marcus Buckingham, Play to Your Strengths.
Yeah.
I think it was called something along that lines. Forgive me if I have the title wrong. And I went, oh, what's he reading? So I went and got a copy myself. Before you knew it, I was playing to my strength. And
what happened?
I found those, I found those things that, people would point out saying you need to work on this and this, would naturally start changing. They were getting better. I was getting better at those bad things while my strengths were still moving up. However, if I was only allowed to focus, and improve my deficiencies, then my strengths were actually weakening because I wasn't getting to do them. And I thought, hey, this is smart thinking here, changing the way you're doing things. And I thought, well, this is much better, and I can't help but think of that now that we're through the pandemic, because it's as though everyone now has read that book and they're doing things in a way that's making them feel better.
Strengths-based leadership. We've been leading programming in this for more than 2 decades, right? And it really, really works. Again, it's a paradigm and philosophy change. So our leaders open not only to the story, but to the vast amounts of research. Gallup has been really the beacon of strengths-based research over 5 decades, more than 5 decades. And if we look at what the research really does show, it is much easier for us to lean into our strengths, and we naturally do, right? This is what I found interesting in the pandemic, because we've seen this in crisis management for years. What happens under crisis? We naturally revert to what we're good at. We naturally lean in to those skills that we do almost automatically. That's what our strengths are. They're innate talents. It's much harder to do the things that we're not naturally good at. So again, coming out of the pandemic, we've been leaning into our strengths, sometimes even over dialing our strengths, which leads to other blind spots, leads to other weaknesses. But it is seen time and time again that individuals and then teams can really excel when we're able to bring our strengths. So part of the interesting area, which, I just want to sort of plant the seed around here for people and leaders to think about is, what do teams need then? If we're activating individual strengths, how do we weave that together? How do we find that best blend of people so that it covers the range of what we need? That's a
Mhm.
big part of our work at Potentials Realized, working with teams on how do you really, activate what you're great at naturally, and how do you really learn to either adjust what you need to do, or sometimes partner with others so that you can bring strengths that you don't naturally have. Because I've seen year after year teams go, wow, now I know why we're not great at building a new book of customers. Financial services, for example, teams that
Mhm.
have been mandated to grow our customer base, grow the client base. And as they look at their strengths, individually and collectively, there's no strengths there around relationship building.
Hmm.
So, it has implications on many, many levels.
Well, let's change gears a little bit. You
Mhm.
talk about a triad.
Yes.
Now, I was going to say what those three things were, but I'm going to leave that to you to explain. What are you talking about when you talk about this triad?
So I call it the triad of trust, safety, and connection. And really, teams, organizations that excel need to cultivate these three areas. For exceptional performance to happen, we need to feel safe when we go to the workspace. Like many organizations have been talking about and doing work around psychological safety. Now, psychological safety, or just safety in general, how do we feel safe? We need to trust those we're working with. And so, how do we know the people that we're working with? How do we trust them as well? And that's a behavioral, we develop trust through behavior that we can see, which has been problematic or challenging in the pandemic. And that is contingent on having relationships with each other or having connection. So, in fact, my TED Talk, which I recorded last summer, is called the Virtual Remote and Hybrid Checklist. And as people listen to it, you'll hear me speak about that triad or triangle of trust, safety, and connection. Like a triangle, it's three-sided. When we erode one area, the other two areas get impacted. So if I don't feel connected with my team, it's very hard for me to feel safe and develop trust with those other members. I'm going to still operate in isolation. I can't really lean in and bring my best self to the relationship because I don't
Mhm.
know who I'm working with. And we really need that. Again, if we look globally at all of the research around what are the levels of trust around the world, we're at some of our lowest rates ever. And, in part, this may be because of the isolation that we've had in these last few years. So we have an opportunity now. How do we really work with people to reconnect? Hence the title of Reconnecting Workspaces. How do we reconnect, get to know each other, really look at what people are bringing to the different spaces we're working in, whether it's a community initiative, whether it's an organizational initiative. People need to know who they're working with. Just, we're not just showing up and clocking in and leaving at the end of the day in most roles.
I'm thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking that everyone in the organization plays a part in that triad, right? It's not just somebody in the C-suite or a team lead or director or whoever, but even just the newest person that comes into the office. They have to contribute to that triad, right?
Absolutely, right? The everyone needs to be involved. And so again, what are we seeing in the workplace right now? A lot of churn, a lot of turnover. Organizations that are doing exit interviews. I think it's going to be really interesting to be listening for why are people leaving? Did they even feel connected at the onset? Right? And just saying, hey, welcome to our organization, whether it's physical or virtual onboarding, that's not enough. People may need a mentor. They may need like a peer partner to help them really get connected with, again, things like the culture of the organization. How
Mm-hmm.
do we do things here? Virtually, we need to be much more explicit with everything because we can't necessarily touch things. Same thing in the hybrid world, right? It's not like just going into an office. We need to really also be always communicating and sort of creating what they would say artifacts, structures to say, this is how we do things here in this Zoom or Teams meeting. This is our team, and this team is different than the other team. So how do we demonstrate that? And that's through simple things like our backgrounds on a screen. It's the way we host meetings. It's, our connections. So
What did you mean by backgrounds on our screens?
so
That's
notice our
interesting.
backgrounds, right? These are things that we have control over. How do we use our backgrounds, which we can change mostly, and in a Zoom room or a Teams room, how do we change that to illustrate something important, right? Maybe there's a message. Maybe there is, I go to meetings with some of my clients, right? And they're on matrix teams. So as they move from one team to another team, they literally change their screen. And each team has different colors, different branding. It's a subtle but important piece around team identity. And again, any of us that have been leaders of teams probably know how important it is to create that sense of identity. I'm on this team. I'm proud to be part of this team. I feel like I am part of this team. An area we haven't touched on yet, Alex, is belonging, right? And really at the heart of all of this is belonging. How am I contributing? How am I feeling part of this team? So back to our screensavers, well, not our screensavers, but our virtual backgrounds. That's one way to also create identity. Is it that different than giving people a t-shirt as they come out and say, hey, thanks for coming out. You're part of this organization. It's just a way to indicate membership, connection, community, really, at the end of the day.
Interesting. On that note, we've come to the end of our second segment. Today, we are talking with Jennifer Britton, the author of Reconnecting Workspaces, and we will be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.